Hello, hello, hello. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. Our next video will be on the Department of Defense Support Systems. So let's start. So understand that the National Security Council, they look at the posture of the country. They look ahead to determine what type of threat the country faces, then how they're going to posture themselves to address those threats. And so they being the National Security Council, publishes the National Security Strategy. That's our big order, operational order. In an operational order, when you receive it from your higher, all the subordinate organization will review the document to determine what specific things relate to their agency. So the Department of Defense is no different. They look at the national security strategy and then pull out, okay, this is what the country needs to do. Then what are the defense related things that we need to do to meet the national security strategy? And so the DoD, the Secretary of Defense, will develop the National Defense Strategy. So based on the NSS, DoD develops the National Defense Strategy. And so in order for the Department of Defense to meet the National Defense Strategy, then they need to use the DoD support systems. There are 3 DoD support systems. You have JCITS, Joint Capabilities Integration and Development Systems, Planning, Programming, Budgeting, and Execution, which is PPBE, and the DAS, Defense Acquisition System. So how does it begin? So we know that the National Defense Strategy is the plan for DoD to meet the National Security Strategy. How is that done? Through the JCITS process, Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System. Let me get my little pointer here. So what you see here is the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. So remember, you got the Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, which is the senior military advisor to the National Security Council, the President, the Secretary of Defense. So the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff has oversight. They're in charge of the JCITS process. He has the Joint Requirements Oversight Council, the JROC, to assist. This is an analytical process. So what they do is they look at the plan, look at what the National Defense Strategy says, and then they look at what are the military requirements within that National Defense Strategy. So what they do in the analytical process, they're looking at the .MLPF. What does that stand for? You got doctrine. Actually, hold on, let me undo this so I can click. All right, so you got doctrine, organization, training, material, leadership and education, personnel, and facilities, .MLPF. So while they're doing the analysis here, they're looking at doctrine to see, is it anything we need to change in the doctrine? Organizational structures of our military? Do we need additional training? So what they're trying to identify, are there any capability gaps? Are we missing anything of this .MLPF, anything that we need to meet the National Defense Strategy? What are we missing? So JCITS identified capabilities gap by looking at the .MLPF, and the acronym is listed at the bottom here. You can see .MLPF listed there. So if it is doctrine, organization, training, leadership and education, personnel, and facilities, if the requirement to fill the capability gap falls in any one of these categories other than material, it triggers the PPBE process. That's how we buy things. Plan, program, budget, execution, which oversight is done by the Deputy Secretary of Defense. If it's a material solution, it's going to require a new aircraft built, a new vehicle, a new computer system. If it's a material solution that's going to fill that capability gap in the initial capabilities document identified in the JSIS process, a material solution will then trigger the Defense Acquisition System, oversight by the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. If you have a 2018 study guide, it's the USD AT&L, Undersecretary of Defense, Acquisition Technology and Logistics. I'm putting that out because some individuals say, even though we have the 2020 book, the exam says 2018 material. So this title did not change. This title changed in the 2020 book from USD AT&L to USD ANS. And if you notice, all three diagrams overlap to meet the National Defense Strategy. And what does the National Defense Strategy meet? It is postured to meet the National Security Strategy, which is the Big Apple. So these are the three DoD support system. JSIS, identified capabilities gap by looking at the .mlpf. If it's anything other than material, it triggers the PPBE process. If it's a material solution, it triggers the Defense Acquisition System. What I also want to note is, I didn't put it on here, but the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff that sits here to identify capability gap is the co-chairman of the Defense Acquisition Board on this side. So they kind of make sure that things stay in line with the guidance that's published from the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff and so forth, and the fiscal guidance that's received from the Secretary of Defense. So they co-chair the Defense Acquisition Board over here. While they're building things, they're making sure it's meeting the capability gap. And then PPBE process is a process that we use to request funding for our programs. So if funding because we need additional training, we need instructors, because we need to develop our organizational structure and so forth. All right, so that was just a small snippet of the DoD support systems, because these are very important when you review the CDFM material. All right, be sure to subscribe to our CDFM study group YouTube page. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave comments under the video, or click like, click share. Share with those who are also studying for the CDFM. And if you see any material that's out there that I'm putting on these YouTube videos and you know that is definitely wrong, leave a comment so that I can go ahead and make those updates, because I'm a one-man show, a one-woman show at this point. So their chances are sometimes I might have an error on a slide or something like that. All right, so thank you for stopping by. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM Study Group. I'll see you guys again next time.